Hey guys, what's going on here? It's Fins from Team Gins, and I'm excited as all hell for Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy sneak peek tomorrow. I will be going to the tournament and the sneak peek, and we will be filming it right here on this channel. We're going to open up all the packs for you guys. We're going to probably get a match or two on tape, and it's going to be a fun time. And what deck am I playing? I'm bringing Gustos there. I brought this there last weekend. I came in first place. Fantastic stuff. I went up against 6 Sams, I went up against X-Sabers, I went up against Naturias, I went up against Atlanteans, I went up against plenty of stuff. Fantastic. I came in first overall, just because nobody really expects this deck to be any good. But without further ado, this is the deck that I'm bringing tomorrow, and without further ado, here we go with the deck profile. There's a lot that's changed, actually, since the last deck profile that I've done of Gustos. So, without further ado, here we go. First up, you need to run 3 of the Gusto Guldo, my favorite card in the deck. It's so great just because even if he's destroyed by a card effect like Dark Hole, Torrential Tribute, you still get the search. You gotta run your 3 Winda, of course. And you gotta run 3 Eagle. That's the main Gusto engine of the deck, the main Gusto wall that they call it, the main... It's so hard for people to get around nowadays, especially decks that swarm so much. Like, if you, open up with Gusto Guldo against Atlanteans and they try and get rid of it with Heavy Infantry or whatever that card is that pops face downs, but, it's just like they can't get over it, and then you had a never-ending loop of Gusto cards, and then you just have cards like Contact that just refill your deck. It's just so hard for so many decks to get over, especially like 6 Sams, X-Sabers, just any deck that swarms a lot of creatures and goes for OTKs, it's too much for them. Next up, I only have 1 cam right now, but you know what? It works perfectly fine. It's still such a busted card. It's so good. The fact that you're getting 2 cards back to your deck, and then you're essentially drawing 2 cards that turn is so good. Not to mention you can go into a lot of level 4s with her, and this guy right here, Musto. Musto is actually one of my favorite cards in the deck. He gets over things like Machina Fortress, he gets over things like Xian, he gets over a lot of cards that are just pesky to get over, plus you're getting cards back to your deck, which is always fantastic. And next up, I call these 3 my first round favorite, because I usually side them out in the second round, but basically what I did with the deck is the first round I try and be a little bit more offensive, and then the second duel I side in a few more traps and stun cards and try and go for a little bit more of a defensive play. But I usually first round play 1 Gusto Squirrel, just because I run Torrential Tribute and Dark Hole, and not to mention it's just the surprise factor. Your opponent gets so used to running over these small monsters, if you set Gusto Squirrel and they're going to run into an 1800 wall. Not to mention if he's destroyed by card effect, which happens very often, you get to bring out Reese. Reese is my second favorite card in the deck, besides Gusto Guldo, because he's just so ridiculous. Reese is ridiculous. Basically, this card, like I said that this was my 3 that I usually side out, but I sometimes keep Reese in just because she's so awesome. Her effect is so stupid and ridiculous. You get, basically, to use a creature swap on any card your opponent controls, except the big difference is you get to choose the card that you get from your opponent. So usually if you use creature swap, they're going to give you the smallest monster if they have a bigger monster. But if your opponent has like an Abyss Megalo out, then you can just swap it with one of your smaller Gusto cards or this card. It's just so good. And finally, I run the 1 Gusto Thunderbolt just to get out Reeds usually. I usually side him out though in Game 2, but Game 1 I usually like having him. Now for a couple of personal tech choices of mine. I've been trying out Kamui on YGO Pro, and she also works with this next guy, as well as Winda. I run 2 Junk Synchron. I love Junk Synchron in this deck. It just, if you have a Winda in your graveyard, which is pretty often for me, because I try and shuffle in Gusto, Guldo, and Eagle into my deck with cards more often than Winda, just because I don't like Winda that much. But Junk Synchron makes Winda so much better than she actually is, so it's fantastic. Real fun personal tech of mine, double interplanetary, purpley thorny dragon. Your monsters basically are there for one reason, that's to get run over and special summon more from the deck. If you have this in your hand and you end up getting the Reese out, then you could really do some nasty, nasty things like swap, like special summon him off of like a Gusto Thunderbolt getting destroyed, remove Gusto Thunderbolt, bring out Reese your next turn, swap a small Gusto with one of your opponent's big monsters, then go into Adrius, do some really nasty things. So that's why I like having the Interplanetary Purpley Thorny Dragon. Plus, he's a free 2200 beta that you get to special summon whenever your monsters are destroyed by battle or card effects. It's really good. Final personal tech choice of mine, really liking this guy right now. I love Compulsory Evacuation Device this format, and I love Neo-Spacian Grand Mole. Just because, like, I know people are saying right now that Compulse isn't good because of Elemental Dragons and Atlanteans, and it really doesn't help at all. But for the most part, you gotta remember that the best, like, their best plays, those decks, are some of their XYZ plays. Like, Elemental Dragons, like, people are like, oh, Compulse is terrible against that because they're just gonna special summon it back out. Not if you, like, Compulse their, Draco Sack. If you end up getting that back to their extra deck, it makes it so harder for them to go off because now they got to waste even more resources just getting it out. So I just love Neo-Spacian Grand Mole this format. Plus, I just, you know, if anything, I just side him out because I got plenty of tricks in my extra deck and side deck. Onto the spells. I believe that's 20 monsters for the monsters. Onto the spells. 2 Contact with Gusto, amazing card, really, amazing card. Just because you get to shuffle 2 Gustos into your deck and destroy any card on the field that your opponent controls. It's so good, face up, face down, monsters, back row, whatever. 1 Quill Pen of Goldos. I do like this card, just because, like, you get out cards like Stardust sometimes, or anything along those lines. So, Quill Pen of Goldos is just basically the same thing as Contact, except you get to send it back to the hand, which is also great with, like, spells, because you can hit back row with it. You can just target any card your opponent controls, which is just so good. 2 Pod Duality. I know you special summon a lot in this deck, but it's mostly for, like, first turn if you want to look for that back row. Not to mention this deck has a lot of special summoning on your opponent's turn, so overall it just really doesn't hurt that much to have the 2 Pod Duality. 1 Mind Control. Deck Synchro summons and XYZ summons a lot, so it's just a good time with that card. Double Creature Swap. I think 3 is a little overkill. I don't know, I just don't like 3 really. I've tried it, but I think it's just a little overkill. 1 Magical Mallet. This card is really good in this deck, just because you don't want to be drawing too many Gusto Eagles or Goldos or Windas or anything like that. Like, I opened up 1 duel with all 3 Gusto Goldo, and I ended up losing because of that. So I've been teching in Magical Mallet for a while, just for the reason that I like not having a lot of Gustos in my hand. I like having them in the deck, and I like drawing into back row with it, so it just works a lot better. 2 MSTs in Heavy Storm, Dark Hole, and Monster Reborn. That wraps it up for the spells, and now for the traps. We got the Solemn Twins, we got Solemn Judgment and Solemn Warning. Double Torrential Tribute, which I love in this deck. 2 Compulse. And finally, 1 Starlight Road. You set a lot of back row in this deck, and you have a lot of cards on the field always. It's just fantastic to have Starlight Road handy. Okay, without further ado, this is the extra deck. First up, we have the 4 big Gusto Synchro monsters. I do like having them all here just for separate reasons. Gusto Falcos, I don't really like him that much, and I sometimes wish I didn't have him. I wish I had something else in my extra deck, but to be honest, he comes in handy every once in a while. Like, if you ended up getting him out with Cam on the field, it brings Cam up to, how much does he get? 600 attack. So that would bring Cam up to 2300. So that's really a great effect if you think about it. It's a little situational, but for the most part, I do like having him in the deck. Dagustos Freeze for the OTK, which I don't often do. I don't like OTKs, but it's just, mostly I don't like OTKs, but I usually just use her for her effect of getting a spell Gusto card back from my graveyard to my hand, like Contact with Gusto or something like that. Gusto Goldos, excuse me. I used to run 2. I actually really like it at 2, but I just needed the space in my extra deck. He's probably my favorite Gusto Synchro just because he's just so good. And he's another level 5, too. You make Adrius in this deck, like, every duel. So it's ridiculous. And finally, for the Gusto Synchros, we got the Digusto which one is this? Eagles. Sorry, I don't I don't know them as well as the other ones, but I do like him just because he's a big beater, and I sometimes like using his remove wind play from play a wind monster to destroy a back row on like Musto or something that I'm probably not going to use again. Now for the generic synchros, one Hyper Librarian, that should be kind of obvious. One Gaia Knight, Stardust for Starlight Road, Scrap Dragon, my favorite synchro in this deck, just because he combos stupidly with Gusto Guldo, because you can pop him, get your search, pop one of your opponent's cards. Oh, it's stupid. And final synchro, Crimson Blader. I don't understand why Crimson Blader is a rare. I think he's just one of the best synchro cards right out there right now. For the XYZs, you have a lot of level 3s, so you got to run your 1 Zen mains. I think you got to run the 1 Zen mains. I don't like Acid Golem at all. And Leviathan Dragon. I don't really like Acid Golem at all. I mean, I do side out Skill Drain, and I could be nasty, but I don't know. I think that it's better stuff you can do. And for the level 4s, we got the 1 Utopia. Ooh, 1 Abyss Dweller. And 1 Popple Operative. I end up going to Popple Operative a lot in this deck, actually. And the final card in the extra deck is Adrius, who I just said. Adrius, basically, I go into every duel, no matter what. There's, like, no stopping Adrius, in my opinion. For the quick side deck, 1 Maxi. 1 Gemini Imps, just because Dark Worlds are kind of a problem at my locals right now. 2 DD Crow. 1 Book of Moon, which I, for ages, have been bored of this card. I just thought it wasn't that good. But right now, I actually really like this card. I'm really enjoying it. Double Skill Drain, for obvious reasons. 2 Mind Crush. 1 Needle Ceiling, which I end up siding into a lot. I'm actually really digging this card right now. And 2 Mirror Force, which I also really side into a lot in this deck. But leave a comment down below, guys, if you like the deck or have any thoughts on the deck. And be sure to check in tomorrow for my video on the sneak peek. And until then, guys, take it easy.